the first answer is, how long did it take me to start making changes to my lifestyle so that I could maybe halt the progression of any other autoimmune diseases and also deal with the 3 autoimmune diseases that I already had developed? The answer is within 24 hours. I didn't have a choice. I had no choice, right? I'm eating in a dormitory setting, right? We had these eating clubs at Stanford. It's a cafeteria, and there's relatively high quality food, but you don't really have control over what you're being fed. But the doctors at that time did tell me that the way that I could control my blood glucose and way that I could prevent myself from using more and more insulin over the course of time was to eat a low carbohydrate diet.
Low carbohydrate, high fat, high protein.
Low carbohydrate, high fat, high protein. You nailed it.
So
right?
Essentially ketogenic diet is what they're telling you.
Yeah, but they didn't. Back in 2002, people weren't using the word ketogenic.
Right.
It
was Atkins term, or it was just high
Atkins.
Fat or Atkins.
Exactly. Yep. But even then they didn't use those words. They basically said, they basically drilled into my head. They said, carbohydrates are bad for you. Don't eat carbohydrates. And when, and actually what they said is, don't eat carbs. Here's this book that tells you how many carbs are in each of the foods that you're eating. And their recommendation was try and limit your intake of all carbs, whether they come from breads and cereals and pastas and granolas and, rice and crackers and more refined versions of carbohydrate, or whether they came from fruits and vegetables and legumes and whole grains. Okay.
They grouped them all together and said they were all bad for you.
Exactly. All carbohydrates are bad for me. And so I was like, okay, great. I should probably not eat paper as well. I probably shouldn't eat wood as well, because there's carbohydrate in those foods as well. Right. So in reality, that was the first mistake. The first mistake that the medical institution had imparted to me was that all carbs are equal. All carbohydrate energy is treated the same way inside of the metabolic machine in which you live. And as a result of that, I went into this mindset of, okay, cool. I don't really know that much about biology, but what I do know is what my doctors told me, which is that I should try and avoid carbohydrate as much as possible. So that means more white meat, more red meat, more dairy products, more chicken, more fish, eggs. Processed meats are fine because they don't contain carbohydrate, right? Huge mistake. But, olive oil, peanut butter, turkey burgers, any of these foods is totally fine, except try and avoid the fruits, the legumes, the potatoes, the rice, the beans, the whole grains, the quinoas, the brown rice, all of that stuff. Avoid that. And then, of course, don't drink sugar sweetened beverages. Don't have refined white bread and white pasta at the same time. And I was like, okay, great. This seems like a relatively easy prescription. I'm a 22-year-old guy. You don't really have to convince a 22-year-old guy to eat more meat. Most of the time the answer is like, okay, great. If that's my prescription, that's the greatest prescription I've ever heard of. I'll do it. No problem. So I did that. Right. And it didn't take me long to answer your question. How long did it take me to adopt this philosophy? The answer was immediately, because I wanted to make sure that I was doing whatever I possibly could in order to keep myself in a healthy state or to regain the health that I had lost.
So they, in that circumstance, they quote unquote gave you somewhat of a solution. Eat this way, don't eat this way. You'll reduce your insulin needs, and this will keep you fairly stable, right? Like that was, so you had, some information and some sense of like, okay, this is what I'm being told to do, so I better do this, right?
Exactly.
So
right.
It makes sense that you were able to just, okay, here we go, let's do it. Of course. I mean, who wouldn't make those changes right away, especially with what you just went through and, almost knocking on death's door, 24 hours before.
Exactly right. And, I consider myself to be the type of person, I think you and I have a very similar personality in this respect where, you're dealt with adversity, and rather than playing the woe is me, let me, get depressed about this and spend a lot of time thinking about it and really like get down on myself. Instead, I took the opposite mentality of like, all right, there's a problem. I don't know what the solution to the problem is, but I got to start trying something. Right. And I'm not going to spend too much of my mental or emotional or physical energy, getting down on myself. Instead, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to learn about it. And I'm just going to start to make the changes that seem to be, guided by the most scientific evidence.
So again, I call it solution-oriented mindset. And I didn't really truly, I mean, I think I've probably had some of that most of my life, but I don't think I really truly like cultivated and developed that and made that a part of who I am until like my early 20s, and really having some great mentors in my life, learning to meditate, learning to realize there is a solution to every problem and everything's possible. Like, I mean, one of my mentors, that's what he used to say all the time, everything is possible. And we would go in and like really philosophically talk about what does that actually mean. It wasn't like a surface level kind of motivational thing. It was like, let's look at this from a universal, creation kind of aspect, scientific, like, we would go deep into that, just that statement right there. Everything is possible. And so I started really ingraining that like early 20s. When did you, like looking back at your childhood, did you have a childhood where you kind of had that solution oriented mindset already? Was it your parents? Like, when did you kind of develop that for yourself? How did you develop that for yourself?
That's a great question. I think the answer is I was born with it. And that may sound like a strange thing to say, but from a very young age, I was always the type of person who would experience the way that I deal with adversity, whether it's adversity that comes from the outside world or whether it's voluntary adversity. I can deal with adversity like relatively quickly, and I can sort of categorize what the problem is, even if I don't have any solutions to the problem. I can try and figure out what is the problem. I can talk about it. I can say, okay, cool. This is an adversity that is now impacting my life. Let's try something. Let's do some experimentation and let's try and find a way out of it, or try and find a way to improve my quality of life. Right. So that happened from a young age when I was like playing baseball and I would get injured. Right. I was playing baseball and all of a sudden, like, I was covering home plate and, a player would slide into me and, cleats up and end up, taking a chunk out of my knee. And then I had to go to the hospital and get stitches in my knee. The answer is, well, what am I going to do about that? I'm kind of immobile right now. The answer is, well, I'm going to go exercise other parts of my body, and I'm going to go work on my throwing, and I'm going to go become a better baseball player, even though I can't use my leg right now. Right. Solution oriented. When I got to high school and I ended up taking the PSAT, the pre-SAT, and I did way worse than all of my other friends on it. And I was like, oh my God, like I scored 200 points worse than the rest of my friend group. What did I do? I told my mom, she got me a tutor. And then I took an SAT every single Saturday for the next 9 months until I finally took the real SAT, and I bumped my score up by 300 some odd points. Wow. Right. Again, solutions oriented, because there's always going to be problems in life. And the way that I rationalize it is that life isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you respond to the things that are happening to you, right? It's all about your responses and what actions you're going to take in order to try and overcome adversity. Hey, I'm Cyrus Khambatta, co-creator of the Mastering Diabetes Method, which has helped thousands of people reverse insulin resistance and take control of their lives, no matter what type of diabetes they're living with. Do you want to know all of our tips, tricks, and secrets? They're right here in our New York Times best-selling book, Mastering Diabetes, which you can find at masteringdiabetes.org/book. If you're ready to master diabetes, pick up a copy today. You won't be disappointed.